Mallory, my daughter, leaned in on the courthouse steps and whispered, "If you think this makes us even, you're not done suffering." She'd stolen my house, my name, my life, and now she wanted mercy. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You should have made sure I stayed dead." All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, sterile and cold. I opened my eyes to a beige ceiling and the mechanical hiss of a respirator near the bed. The nurse, a stranger in powder blue scrubs, stood by my chart, her voice calm but not kind. "You're awake," she said without a smile. "We didn't think you were coming back." I tried to sit up. My chest burned like fire. I felt sutures beneath the thin gown. Bandages stretched tight where my sternum had been split and stitched back together. Tubes snaked out of me like vines. My mouth tasted of metal and cotton. Something was wrong, not just in my body, but in the room. "Where's my bag?" I rasped. "My purse? My rings?" The nurse didn't look up from her clipboard. "Nothing was logged with your belongings, just your gown and the hospital-issued blanket. Your daughter said she'd take care of everything." "Mallory," I whispered. My voice cracked. She nodded absently. "She was here the night they wheeled you in, signed the intake papers, gave us emergency access. But after the second day, she stopped coming." I blinked, heart monitor ticking steadily. A knot formed in my stomach. "Can I see my phone?" After a long pause, the nurse pulled open a drawer and produced a gray hospital bin. Inside was my phone, familiar in shape but foreign. I powered it on. The wallpaper was gone, contacts erased, the last call was to voicemail, but the call log had been wiped. Everything was reset, like I'd never existed in it at all. "Why would someone reset my phone?" I asked. "They said it was acting funny," the nurse offered, shrugging. "We were told to box everything. No forwarding address was given." "By who?" Her silence answered that. I tapped into the voicemail with trembling fingers. Static hiss, then a soft tone. "Hey, Mom, hope you're resting. We figured you might not make it through recovery. Just wanted to let you know we're staying in the house. You always said you wanted us to feel at home, so we did. Sleep tight." Mallory's voice sweetened at the edges, matter of fact. The blood drained from my face. I buzzed for the nurse again. "Can I speak to billing?" I said through gritted teeth. She looked surprised now. "Yes, now." At the reception desk, a tired young woman flipped through her screen as I sat in a wheelchair, heart pounding harder than it should. She clicked, scrolled, squinted. "There's an issue with your payment," she said. "Your card declined. We reached out to the person listed on your file, Mallory Cole, but she said you'd transferred financial authority." "I prepaid this stay. I wrote the check myself. It cleared." "Not according to our system. A stop payment was issued 3 days ago. Your insurance is also inactive." I felt like I was watching someone else's nightmare. I had full coverage. I had my Medicare supplement. I had long-term care insurance. "This isn't right." She raised her hands, uncomfortable. "I can't speak to what happened, ma'am. All I can say is this account is open and it's past due." The next morning, I demanded to see the head nurse. My memory was still fogged, but the rage gave me clarity. When the lead nurse came in, she offered sympathy with clinical distance. "It happens more often than you'd think," she said. "Families get scared. They make decisions. Sometimes they assume the worst." But I was never declared unresponsive. I was out for 48 hours after surgery. That doesn't make me dead. She said nothing. I looked down at my hands, pale, thin, still bruised at the IV sites. No wedding ring, no retirement gift bracelet, not even the locket my late husband gave me, which I never removed. All gone. They hadn't thought I'd come back, so they took everything. Later that evening, in the hospital's patient library, I borrowed a laptop. My login for the mortgage account failed. So did the utilities. My email password had been changed. I clicked through backup email notifications, and that's when I saw it. One message left unread, marked urgent, sent from my financial institution 4 days ago. "Miss Cole, we are reaching out to verify a recent transfer of ownership on your accounts." As no response was received, the request was processed via the designated power of attorney on file. "Please call us immediately if this was unauthorized." My vision blurred. The heat in my chest wasn't from the surgery anymore. I clicked into the next unread voicemail. Mallory again. "Hope you're resting, Mom. We figured you'd never make it. We're staying in the house." I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stared at the screen and thought, then neither will I. The taxi slowed in front of my house. My house. Just past dusk, when the ocean's breeze swept the street with that soft, salty ache I used to breathe like prayer. But something was off. The porch light used to be a soft amber glow. Now it was icy white, too bright, spotlighting a new brass welcome mat I'd never seen in my life. I stepped out slowly, each breath a cautious hiss. My chest still ached, but not as much as the hollow buzzing behind my ribs. I reached into my purse and pulled out my house key, silver with a pink heart sticker Mallory had put on it when she was 10. It didn't fit. I tried again, jiggled the lock. Nothing. A dog barked inside. I hadn't owned a dog since 2006. Then footsteps fast, thumping down the hallway. The door creaked open. A boy, maybe 15, bored, shorts, tousled blonde hair. Can I help you?" I stared at him. "Excuse me?" He tilted his head. "You're Mallory's mom, right?" I said nothing. My lungs couldn't expand. "She said you were in, like, a home or something. This is her place now." The door creaked open wider. My wallpaper was gone. The coastal blue had been painted over with trendy grays. Where my antique mirror once hung, a neon good vibes only sign buzzed lowly in pink cursive. I felt the edge of the world crumble. "Mallory," the boy called, "your mom's here?" Moments later, Mallory glided into view, silk robe, fresh blowout, champagne flute in hand. She looked like she hadn't worried a day in her life. Her smile was tight, performative. "Mother, you really shouldn't be out of bed yet. That was unexpected." I couldn't find words. I looked past her into the home I had built with every after-tax paycheck. The cherrywood coffee table was gone, my quilts, my plants, stripped, replaced by white leather furniture and art prints of phrases like live, laugh, love. "What are you doing here?" I asked, each syllable stiff. Brian appeared behind her, all smug confidence and Patagonia casual. "Vivian, hey, you gave us quite the scare." "I want to know what's going on." Mallory glanced at Brian, then back at me with faux sympathy. "You weren't supposed to come home. You needed round-the-clock care. We thought a facility would be best." "What facility?" She waved a hand, dismissive. "You said it yourself how tiring the stairs were getting, that you might look into assisted living eventually. We just expedited it." "Without speaking to me?" Brian stepped forward. "It was easier. You were in recovery. We didn't want to stress you." "You moved into my home." Mallory's tone shifted, frost creeping in. "We didn't move in. We transferred. The lawyer filed the property reassignment weeks ago. You don't remember?" I staggered back a step, blinking. "I never signed anything." "You granted me power of attorney," she said, sweet as syrup. "Temporary, yes, but broad. You were unconscious." "There were decisions to make." I laughed, but it came out like a choke. "I prepaid my hospital. My accounts were being mismanaged," Brian cut in. "Mallory just streamlined things." "Streamlined?" My voice was low now. "You mean emptied?" Neither of them flinched. Mallory reached into a side drawer and pulled out a plain white envelope. She walked it to me like a hostess handing off a party favor. "We wanted you to have something to land on," she said. "This is your remainder after the sale, bills, everything. You'll be comfortable for a while." My fingers trembled as I opened it. A cashier's check. $4,200. I stared at the number like it was a punchline. $4,200. After 40 years of saving, after co-signing Mallory's student loans, after paying off her wedding, her first car, after giving her my emergency fund when she and Brian hit a rough patch. "This is theft." "No," Mallory said, voice tight. "It's transition," Brian added. "It's legal. Every move had paperwork. We made sure of it." I stepped back onto the porch. The light flickered once, harsh and glaring. My shadow loomed across the walkway, larger than I felt. "I'm not staying in a motel," I whispered. "That's fine," Mallory said, already turning back into the house. "You don't live here anymore." As the door closed, the paper still clutched in my hand, I heard Brian's voice through the crack. "She'll fade out, babe. People like her always do." I sat cross-legged on the edge of the motel bed, my laptop balanced on my knees, the sterile scent of bleach clinging to the polyester comforter. I typed in my Chase login, email, password, and hit submit. Account not found. I tried again, slower, double-checked every character, nothing. I reached for my phone, which still felt foreign in my palm since the factory reset. Every app was gone, the cloud backups wiped. It took me 10 minutes to remember my Apple ID, and when I finally logged in, all my saved notes, my calendar, my reminders vanished. I opened the browser and typed in PG and E next, the utility login for my home of 32 years. Username does not exist. One after another, I tried everything. My Fidelity investment portal, my Blue Shield insurance account, even the neighborhood HOA board I used to run. All locked, all gone. They hadn't just taken my house. They'd scrubbed my digital fingerprint clean. I was floating, disconnected from my own life, like a ghost haunting a place I used to own. I pulled on a cardigan and walked stiffly to the motel lobby's vending area, where a landline sat next to a dusty brochure rack. I dialed the hospital billing department, heart pounding. A receptionist answered, chipper. Good morning, Santa Cruz General Billing Department. This is Vivian Cole. I'm calling about my prepayment for my cardiac procedure. I was in room 312 up. Long pause, clicks on a keyboard. I'm sorry, ma'am, there's no active file showing prepayment. Your insurance didn't process, and the out-of-pocket balance is still outstanding. That's impossible, I said quietly. I wired the money myself 2 days before I was admitted. Perhaps your financial proxy canceled it? She offered. There's a note that your daughter made changes to your file while you were in recovery. I hung up before the tears reached my throat. Proxy. That was the word they used. Not thief, not saboteur. I needed answers, real ones. So I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. Alan Braith, my former financial advisor from Lockwood and Flynn. He'd helped me set up the living trust, the medical directives, everything. He was one of the few people who knew how carefully I'd built my safety net. Vivian, he said cautiously when he picked up. Are you okay? No, I said, but I'm getting there. I need to know who accessed my accounts. There was a long silence. I was under the impression you'd been moved into long-term care, he said finally. Mallory said you were no longer of sound capacity and invoked power of attorney. She lied. He exhaled sharply. Then you should see what she's done. He emailed me a single zip file, activity logs, transfer confirmations, and a spreadsheet dated the day after my surgery. There it was. My name, my account numbers, transfers to her and Brian's shared checking. Wire instructions to a brokerage firm I'd never heard of, dozens of small, legal-looking actions that added up to something monstrous. The final page was labeled Property Transfer Authorization. It had my name in bold at the top and a signature that wasn't mine. I closed my eyes, the motel's old air conditioner groaning as it kicked on. I thought of the 14-year-old girl who used to cry in my arms after school because she thought she wasn't pretty enough. The same girl who once asked if I would still love her if she dropped out of college. Then I opened my contacts and searched a name I hadn't typed in years. Rita Lynn. Rita was the best forensic accountant I'd ever worked with during my aerospace years. She picked apart fraudulent billing schemes for breakfast. If anyone could help, it was her. She answered after 2 rings. Vivian? It's happening, I whispered. I need referrals. I need receipts. I need war. Rita didn't ask questions. She only said, check your inbox in an hour. Exactly 62 minutes later, her email arrived. Attached, a scanned property record with a timestamp from last week. The subject line read simply, Vivian, they sold your home. And beneath that message, in tiny gray font, a second file began downloading. Title, Baxter Family Trust Ownership Transfer Addendum PDF. The glow of the motel lamp caught the ridges of every wrinkle on my hands as I held the pen steady. Each stroke on the paper felt like carving through stone, measured, deliberate, final. Item 1, Formula and Diapers, 1986 to 1988, $3,672. Item 2, Pediatrician Copays and Prescriptions, $9,140. Item 3, Private School Tuition, grades 1 through 6 paid in full, $42,000. I didn't stop. Couldn't. My pen scratched across the yellow legal pad like a scalpel, cutting open memories I hadn't visited in decades. The night she came down with a fever so high I drove through a rainstorm at 3 a.m., in a robe and slippers, praying she wouldn't seize before we reached the ER. The unpaid time off when she broke her leg at camp and I sat beside her for 3 weeks, spoon-feeding her oatmeal and antibiotics. Item 12, emergency room visits, 7 documented, $5,800. Item 13, University of San Diego, full tuition, books, housing, $96,500. Item 14, forgiven loans, postgrad, $21,000. I didn't even adjust for the emotional labor, just the quantifiables. Raw numbers, all pulled from a box of labeled folders I'd kept in storage. Receipts, tuition statements, cashier's checks, and donation letters I'd written in her name to preserve her dignity when she couldn't make rent. I flipped to a new page and added 3% interest, compounded annually. By the time I was done, the number at the bottom wasn't just shocking, it was forensic. $482,713.78. I scrolled to the top of the typed document on my laptop and wrote the title in bold. Final invoice for services rendered, 28 years of care, payable upon sole retrieval. I printed 5 copies at the motel's shared printer, each page sliding out with a quiet hiss. The paper was cheap, the ink already smudging at the corners, but I bound them in a black vinyl folder with a clear cover. When I zipped it into my purse, something inside me settled. Not healed, not yet, but steadied, like the click of a lock sliding into place. That afternoon, I called Rita. "I've got something," I said. "You sound different." "I'm done mourning the daughter I used to have." She didn't respond for a beat. "Then that's the right time to make a call like this. You ready for a lawyer?" "Yes." She sent me a name that came with a sentence attached. "Tasha Monroe doesn't lose, and she especially doesn't lose to family that confuses inheritance with entitlement." I drove an hour north to meet her in a sleek office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the coastal bluffs of Half Moon Bay. Her handshake was firm, her nails were navy, and her smile didn't reach her eyes. Tasha didn't waste time. She opened the folder, scanned the line items like she'd been trained for war, and when she reached the final page, she leaned back. "This isn't just compelling," she said. "It's evidentiary gold." I stayed silent. She looked up. "You know that you can press criminal charges, right? What they did, power of attorney abuse, forgery, unauthorized transfers. It's not just morally repugnant, it's felony-level exploitation under California's Elder Protection Code." I swallowed. I wanted to raise a daughter, not press charges. Tasha nodded. "Then it's a good thing you raised a ledger instead. Because this," she tapped the cover, "this is going to be Exhibit A." A gust of wind pushed against the office windows. Somewhere below, a wave crashed, too distant to hear, but close enough to feel in the bones. I met her eyes. "What do I do now?" She smiled for real that time, sharp and sure. "Now," she said. "Now we start taking it all back." Tasha didn't speak as she swiveled her monitor around to face me, but her mouth was tight, a thin seam that telegraphed everything I needed to brace for. The screen showed a trust ledger. My name was at the top. The dates matched the years I'd spent working overtime, quietly funneling bonuses and dividends into a living trust meant to one day fund college, weddings, maybe even a down payment for a future grandchild's first home. And yet, the disbursement line read, $300,000 wire transfer, Baxter Properties LLC, $292,000, luxury condominium purchase, 4th Street, San Francisco, Vivian M. Cole, e-signature verified. "I never signed that," I whispered. Tasha nodded grimly. "I know." The room tilted. My hand went cold around the glass of water I hadn't touched. "She forged my digital signature," I said, the words scraping their way out. Yes, using an outdated DocuSign link from an email thread you had with your former bank rep." She clicked open the metadata. "It was accessed from Mallory's IP address. Brian notarized it with his online registration from his LLC, which is legally, let's call it shaky." I didn't cry, not right away. I stared at the gleaming photos of the condo she'd bought. Ocean views, a chrome-finished kitchen, marble counters, all tastefully curated in grays and whites. The kind of home she used to say was too sterile for a real family. "This was supposed to be for her children," I finally said. "Not for her Instagram." Tasha leaned forward, her voice soft but steely. "We can recover this. I've already filed a fraud complaint, and I'm drafting a civil suit as we speak." I nodded, but the lump in my throat wouldn't go down. "Will it help?" "It'll do more than help. It'll expose her, which by the looks of it is the only language she understands." That night, I sat in the motel bathtub, fully clothed. I wasn't crying. I was inventorying. Every lunch skipped, every raise diverted, every Christmas bonus I never spent. It had all been love, made liquid, and she drank every drop, then claimed she was thirsty. The next day, I returned to Tasha's office with my revised will. I want it all redirected, I said. Every remaining asset, every savings account, the life insurance, transfer it to a private charitable foundation. Name it Left Behind, Not Powerless. Tasha's eyebrows arched slightly. You're cutting her out completely? She cut first. We signed the amendment. With each pen stroke, I felt something uncurl in my chest, a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since the ICU. And then, as Tasha prepared to close the file, she paused. There's one more thing, she said. Something I dug up while pulling the trust filings. You're not going to like it. She slid a report across the desk. Psychological evaluation. Vivian Cole, age 68. Recommendation, mentally incompetent for financial self-management. I stared at the header, frozen. I never did this eval. You didn't, she confirmed. It was conducted by a third-party evaluator in Monterey County, signed off remotely using medical history pulled from your hospital stay. Mallory submitted it to the court 10 days after your surgery. She was trying to own me on paper, I murmured. She did, until the court quietly approved it. That's how she got full POA reinstated before you woke up. She was laying legal groundwork for permanent conservatorship. I sank into the leather chair. My name was printed on so many lines in so many fonts, and none of them had ever been written by me. Tasha looked at me not gently, but with respect. You still want to go forward? I want to go forward like she never expected I could. Later that night, my burner phone buzzed. A new text, no name attached. Back off or we'll have you committed. For real next time. I stared at the message, my pulse calm. Then I hit forward and sent it straight to Tasha. Let's give them one hell of a reason to try. Tasha called it a gentle weapon. That's how power of attorney laws work when misused. They're supposed to safeguard you in emergencies, she'd said, pushing a thick folder across the table. But in practice, they're a loaded gun in the wrong hands. She didn't have to finish the sentence. I knew whose hands she meant. I packed my things that night and left the motel I'd been hiding in. Checked into a long-stay lodge off Pacific Avenue under the name Anne V. Charles, a silent nod to my mother and the man I loved. It felt petty, maybe even cowardly, but it was safer than sleeping 10 miles away from a woman who'd already sold my life once like it was a used sofa. The first morning, I sat on the thin mattress and started recording. My voice was dry. Day 1 post-op, mental status, lucid, or at least as lucid as anyone who just found out their daughter legally erased them. I tilted the phone camera toward my handwritten medical clearance, 3 pages of neurocognitive test results signed by Dr. Shapiro. You'll want this too, because she's going to say I'm confused, again. By the end of the week, I had a folder full of documents, physicals, therapy notes, bank statements I'd requested by mail. Anything that proved I wasn't the ghost they were painting. I labeled it evidence of life. At night, I scrolled through Mallory's online presence. Her Instagram had gone fully curated. Sepia-toned photos of her cupping her belly, a pastel balloon arch behind her. The caption read, "Grateful every day, especially for the village raising this baby." The village was my backyard, my garden, my hand-painted bench tucked under the apricot tree I planted for my 50th birthday. I watched a live stream from her baby shower. My breath caught in my chest. Brian gave a toast. We wouldn't be here without Mallory's incredible strength and our late mother's generosity. Everyone clapped. Late. As if I had died. I didn't cry. I screenshotted everything, labeled the folder Exhibit A, encrypted, backed up twice. Sometimes I'd laugh, short, sharp bursts of disbelief. She wore my scarf in one photo, the blue cashmere one I'd told her to save for something special. Apparently, special meant erasing the person who gave it to her. Tasha checked in every few days. You're doing everything right, she reassured. Keep documenting. Every contradiction matters. I nodded, silent on the other end of the call. What I wanted to say was, it shouldn't be this easy to silence someone, to use their trust as a weapon. One afternoon, I stepped outside to toss out a bag of empty soup cans and shredded documents. The air was brisk, smelling of salt and wintering eucalyptus. The mailboxes stood in a row at the edge of the parking lot, just past the ice machine. That's when I saw the envelope. No stamp, just a folded sheet of lined paper stuck in the crack of my doorframe. I scanned the parking lot. No one around, just a lawn service van pulling out, engine sputtering. I opened the note carefully, breath held tight. The handwriting was small and uncertain. Vivian, I didn't know what they were doing to you. I want to help. Call me. T. For a moment, my knees buckled. The note smelled faintly of lemon lotion, like the kind Terry used to wear. My neighbor. The one who always brought over extra zucchini bread in the summer. I reached for my burner phone, fingers shaking, not from fear this time, but something else. The first match thrown on a long, quiet fuse. The documents lay across Ruth's dining table like bodies at a crime scene. I ran a finger along my own name, Vivian L. Cole, looped in a smooth cursive that looked eerily like mine but wasn't. Too polished, too young. I taught her that signature, I murmured, my throat tight. She used it to steal the house I raised her in. Ruth didn't say much at first. She pushed her glasses up her nose and hovered over each seal, inspecting dates, ink density, even the font spacing like a bloodhound. Her dining room smelled of lemon oil and aged, polished wood. Justice about to be served. This one's the problem, she said, tapping a particular notarized deed. That's a forged notary stamp. County format changed 2 years ago. They used an old seal. Plus, the notary's commission ID number belongs to a dead woman. Died in 2019. I sat back. So Mallory and Brian faked the paperwork. Ruth nodded once, jaw clenched. They faked you, Vivian. They built a lie around your name. That's identity fraud, property fraud, and a forged instrument. You're looking at jail time for them if it holds. I blinked hard, willing my composure to stay. My hands trembled anyway, not from fear, rage, tightly controlled. Ruth handed me a manila folder. I pulled registry records. The fake notary was listed on a mobile notarization site, but the account links back to a business address. She let the sentence trail off. I finished it for her. Brian's LLC. It felt like swallowing ice. Clean, sharp betrayal lodged in the center of my chest. Within hours, I was on the phone with Tasha. Her voice was calm steel. We'll file complaints with the county recorder's office, the state notary commission, and the Department of Consumer Affairs, she said. I'll draft formal fraud allegations. These people are about to meet real paperwork. And just like that, the tide turned. By the next morning, cease and desist letters were quietly delivered, not from them this time, but to them. One for Brian's brokerage firm, one for Mallory's real estate license, one directly to the escrow agent who had processed the sale. Mallory's world began to tremble, subtle at first. She stopped posting her curated brunches and sunset photos online. The baby shower live streams vanished. A real estate forum tagged her license as under review. Her lawyer, suddenly defensive, issued a bland press release. The parties are working toward a resolution in good faith. But I wasn't after faith. I was after facts, and I had them now. That night, Ruth and I drank chamomile tea in silence. Her house was dim except for the amber glow of a single lamp. I stared at the forged signature again. She was 5 when I taught her to write her name, I whispered. She had trouble with the R, always reversed it like a toy store logo. Ruth looked at me, eyes soft but unwavering. Vivian, she's not 5 anymore. She's a grown woman who chose theft over truth. Whatever happens next, you didn't cause it. I nodded, but the grief of losing a daughter you're still alive to see. It doesn't nod back. It just sits inside your chest, cold and still. Just as I stood to leave, my phone buzzed. Tasha's voice on the line was clipped, urgent. Get ready. Their attorneys just filed an emergency petition for full conservatorship. Hearing's been granted in 72 hours. I didn't sit down. I didn't cry. I just said, then I guess it's time to dress for war. The courthouse smelled like old paper and fresh disappointment. You could taste it, like air pressed flat against glass. I wore navy, no frills, no jewelry, just clean lines, a high collar, and my mother's brooch pinned near my collarbone like armor. The outfit didn't scream strength, but it whispered something sturdier than grief. Tasha and I walked through the metal detectors without speaking. Her heels clicked with purpose, mine shuffled slightly, still recovering from surgery. But my voice, that was sharper than it had been in months. Courtroom 4B was smaller than I expected. Mallory sat already inside, blonde waves perfectly curled, hands folded demurely in her lap. She looked like she was auditioning for a role she thought she'd already won. Brian leaned close to her, whispering something. When she glanced up and saw me, the edge of her mouth twitched, somewhere between pity and condescension. I'd seen that look before, at graduations, at job interviews. Mallory knew how to perform, and she was good, but I wasn't here to outact her. The hearing began with a list of exhibits submitted by Mallory's counsel, hospital charts, vague doctor's notes from the week of my surgery, and what they claimed was a psychiatric evaluation signed by a clinician I'd never met. My eyebrows lifted slightly. Tasha didn't blink. When her turn came, she stood and unzipped the accordion folder we'd assembled like a weapon cache. Out came letters from my primary care physician, dated and signed. Neurocognitive assessments showing above-average executive function, therapist notes, and a USB stick. Exhibit F, Tasha said, holding it up. A series of video logs recorded daily during Miss Cole's recovery. Time-stamped, location verified. The bailiff handed it off. A screen flickered on. There I was, hair matted from the hospital pillow, speaking into the camera with clarity and heartbreak. Today, they told me I signed something I didn't. I don't remember anything after anesthesia, but I remember my daughter's silence. The courtroom air shifted. Mallory leaned forward, visibly agitated. The judge, a woman in her 60s with the unblinking calm of someone who'd seen every family fall apart, lowered her glasses and addressed their side. Why was Miss Cole's home sold while she was still unconscious in post-operative care? Brian opened his mouth, closed it. Mallory tried. We assumed long-term care was what she wanted. She always said she never wanted to be a burden. Tasha stood. Wanting not to burden someone doesn't equal legal permission to strip them of autonomy and assets. The judge's pen tapped the desk twice, then silence. Her eyes cut toward Mallory. Pending full review of these claims, I'm placing a temporary injunction on all access to Miss Cole's financial accounts, trust activity, or property holdings, effective immediately. A pause. Any violation will result in contempt. Mallory's mouth opened, then shut again. Her eyes found me. I didn't flinch. I didn't nod. I didn't even breathe loud enough to be heard. That's how you survive daughters who know how to spin stories. You become the kind of silence that can't be rewritten. When the gavel struck wood, it didn't sound like justice. It sounded like a beginning. We exited through the side corridor. Tasha's voice was quiet beside me. That was just round one, but we're gaining ground. Outside, the air was salt-damp and wind-bitten, the sky a deep gray. The press hadn't shown up, thankfully, but a few observers stood nearby, murmuring. A woman my age gave me a look of quiet encouragement as we passed, but it didn't last. Mallory caught up with me on the courthouse steps. She was alone now, Brian hanging back. Her face was pale, lips pulled tight, like she was trying not to scream. She leaned in, just enough for her voice to cut between my ribs. If you think this makes us even, she whispered, you're not done suffering. I tilted my head. You're right. Then I stepped around her like she was fog and walked into the storm, ready. That evening, I sat in front of my phone camera in the motel's beige kitchenette and spoke like an accountant reading a ledger, because that's what it was, the cost of being erased. Hello, my name is Vivian Cole. I'm 68 years old, and my daughter emptied my life while I was under anesthesia. The ring light flickered slightly. I adjusted it once, leaned forward. On the table in front of me were documents, timestamps, bank records, my hospital bracelet, and the pink folder labeled Exhibit A. I woke up after heart surgery in room 312. My jewelry was missing. My belongings gone. My phone reset. My daughter had checked me in. She never checked back. I paused. Then I added, she told the hospital I wouldn't be coming back. I'd rehearsed it 4 times. I kept it under 5 minutes. Simple framing. No dramatic music. No filters. Just facts. Dates, receipts, I spoke plainly with the cadence of someone used to reconciling inconsistencies because I was. I spent 32 years at Lockheed Martin tracking zeros that didn't belong. Now I was tracking lies. When I uploaded it, I expected maybe a few dozen people to see it. The view count hit 10,000 in the first 3 hours. By morning, it was over 1 million. The comments came in like a flood of women remembering where they'd been left. Same thing happened to my aunt. My son took my pension and told the neighbors I had Alzheimer's. Elder abuse happens in silence. Thank you for making noise. Someone called it the Vivian effect, a trending hashtag, a growing ripple. By the end of the week, I'd received 32 emails from other victims. A paralegal in Portland offered pro bono research support. A trauma counselor in Vermont offered therapy hours for survivors. Even an editor from a nonprofit newsletter asked to reprint my video transcript, so I bought a domain, leftbehindnotpowerless.org. It wasn't fancy. I used a free site builder, just black text on a clean background. But the homepage said, if your child wrote you off like debt, you're not alone. I posted my video there, along with links to mental health resources, legal guides on power of attorney law, and a submission form for anyone ready to tell their story. Within days, we had 5,000 visits, then 20,000. A donor offered matching funds for our first legal aid campaign. I barely recognized the momentum. I had no marketing plan, no fancy strategy, just a voice and a wound and an audience full of people who knew exactly where it hurt. Mallory tried to fight back. She posted her own video, perfectly lit, holding a toddler in one arm, wearing an apron with the words "Best Daughter Ever" printed in gold script. She cried on cue, said I was sick, confused, traumatized by aging, claimed she was protecting me from myself. But truth has a way of echoing louder than theater. Within 48 hours, people began dissecting her lies. Side-by-side screenshots, mismatched dates, duplicate signatures. Someone found her real estate license info and filed a formal complaint. 3 separate whistleblowers flagged her LLC on Reddit. She closed her comments, then she shut down her page entirely, and I started breathing again. Then the email arrived. The subject line read, "You need to see where the rest of your trust went." No sender name, no body text, just a PDF attachment and a line beneath it. I worked for them. I didn't know it would go this far. I opened the PDF on instinct and nausea, the kind that settles in your spine before your mind catches up. The file was a series of ledger scans, obscured titles, slightly off-kilter margins. But the columns didn't lie. Dates, routing numbers, transferred amounts, and right there in bold header font, the Baxter Family Legacy Foundation. I didn't recognize the name, but I recognized the money. $380,000, I murmured. Tasha's voice on the other end of the line was steel wrapped in velvet. Baxter's Brian's mother's maiden name. The shell was registered 6 months ago, Nevada Incorporation. No board, no charity status. But it's been moving money into a brokerage account and then into a down payment in Sausalito. My mouth went dry. So the trust wasn't depleted. It was detoured. Tasha didn't answer immediately. When she did, she only said, "We need to act now." The next 48 hours moved like fire through dry brush. Tasha contacted the state's Charitable Oversight Division with a 30-page packet of evidence. Within 24 hours, the California Department of Financial Protection issued a freeze order on all Baxter Foundation activity. The brokerage account was locked. The foundation's website was taken down. A red banner appeared on the Secretary of State's registry, pending investigation, suspended status. I recorded standing in front of the motel's kitchenette again, holding the trust document in one hand and a screenshot of the Baxter Family Legacy Foundation website in the other. They said my legacy was gone. It wasn't. It was rebranded under a name that didn't belong to me, didn't belong to my family, so they could use it to buy silence, square footage, and status. But this isn't just theft. It's laundering. I paused for effect. It's laundering disguised as love. It went viral again. News outlets began reaching out, not just digital ones. Bay Area Now requested an on-camera interview. A podcast focused on elder abuse asked me to speak. An assistant editor from a publishing imprint I vaguely remembered from my old book club sent me a DM. "Have you considered a memoir?" Then came the door knock. I wasn't expecting anyone. The motel hallway smelled like carpet glue and lemon cleaner, and I opened it with my hand half on the lock. A man stood there, early 40s, pale, thin, eyes dark from sleeplessness. His shoulders sloped like someone used to apology. "I'm Aaron," he said. "I used to be married to Mallory." I didn't speak, just stepped aside and let him in. He didn't waste time. "I saw your video. I didn't leave her soon enough. I need you to know that, but I tried." "I swear to you, I tried." He pulled a folder from his jacket. Inside, dated notes from therapy, joint account withdrawals, signed affidavits, and one brutal email from Mallory to him that read, "She'll be dead in a year, so why does it matter if we use it now?" "She told me you were senile," he said quietly. "That the money was already hers, that Brian knew how to structure it so no one would question it." I gripped the edge of the chair. He exhaled shame in every syllable. She got worse after I left. Controlling, paranoid. Financial abuse, isolation, gaslighting, I've seen it before. I just didn't think she'd do it to her own mother. Tasha later said it was enough to corroborate multiple claims, enough for a full discovery motion, enough to drag this entire masquerade into the sunlight. But Mallory, of course, had her own move planned. 2 days later, a courier knocked on my motel door. He handed me a cream envelope, heavy with embossed court print. I slid it open with the corner of my room key. Superior Court of California. Case num C 2390,145, Defendant Vivian Cole. Plaintiff Mallory Cole Baxter. Claim emotional damages, public defamation, loss of livelihood. By the time the discovery phase officially opened, I no longer shook in fear. I burned. The courthouse conference room smelled faintly of coffee and laminate cleaner, but beneath that there was tension. Sweaty, metallic courtroom tension that clung to everyone's collars. My fingers clutched the edge of my notepad like it was the only thing keeping me from reaching across the table. Tasha leaned forward. We're formally requesting access to all digital communications between Mallory Cole and Brian Baxter from the past 12 months. That includes phone records, text messages, email threads, encrypted messaging apps, and third-party cloud backups. Mallory's lawyer tried to object. The judge's eyebrows rose an inch. Denied, she said. Full discovery means full discovery. The following week came like a tidal wave. Email printouts, Dropbox folders, Slack screenshots, Signal threads, hundreds of pages. Tasha's paralegal flagged one video attachment with a yellow post-it. Timestamp. Day of heart surgery. I watched the clip in her office. Brian, holding a glass of wine, laughed into the camera. She's got a foot in the grave and a full portfolio. She'll be too dead to care where it goes. In the background, Mallory's voice muttered, "Don't jinx it." My jaw didn't clench. I expected rot. But Tasha, who had heard everything by now, looked stunned. "This is egregious," she muttered. "We'll enter it with the financial records and the hospital timeline." I gave her a nod. Let them see it. All of it. That same afternoon, Ruth sat on the witness stand in her pressed beige blazer, a quiet storm in sensible shoes. Her voice didn't waver as she walked the court through the fake notary stamp, how she spotted the discrepancy and the illegal misfiling of title documents. "They didn't just take her house," Ruth said. "They scrubbed her name from her life." Mallory wouldn't meet her eyes. Tasha's closing remarks pierced the air like scalpels. "Your Honor, no mother expects repayment for raising her child, but motherhood is not a blank check to be cashed." Vivian Cole was preyed upon while unconscious, her life carved into assets and transferred before she even woke up. This case isn't about family. It's about fraud. Then, unexpectedly, it happened. Mallory, my daughter, my betrayer, started crying. At first soft, then louder. The courtroom stilled. Her shoulders trembled. Her hands covered her face. It wasn't performance. This was not part of the script. Her mascara streamed. Her attorney leaned in to whisper something. She waved him off like a petulant child refusing dinner. I didn't move. I didn't comfort her. Tasha touched my elbow gently. "Don't let it shake you. The court sees it." I nodded, staring at the woman across the room I had once rocked to sleep after nightmares. The same woman who had sold my bed while I was still recovering in it. The judge shuffled her files, eyes skimming over everything again. The hospital dates, the asset transfers, the trust statement, the notarized lies, the video, the ledger. Her voice was calm and final. "This court will issue a ruling within 5 business days. In the meantime, all temporary injunctions remain in place. The Baxter Trust remains frozen. Miss Cole's assets are not to be touched." 5 days. I had waited longer for blood work results. But this time I wasn't afraid of what the paperwork would say. Mallory wanted to meet me privately. Mallory picked a cafe too chic to be sincere. Glass walls, eucalyptus garlands, and overpriced lattes. The kind of place that looked like forgiveness should be served with oat milk and honey. I chose a seat facing the door. I wanted her to see me first, wanted her to know she had to walk into my gaze, not the other way around. When she arrived, she looked thinner, paler. Her hair was pulled back too tight, and she kept adjusting her sleeves like they were holding secrets. She sat across from me without a hug, a smile, or a word. Just tears, immediate, sharp, and practiced. I didn't know it would go this far, she whispered, wrapping her arms around herself like she needed comfort I wasn't going to offer. I stirred my tea slowly, the silver spoon clinking against porcelain. That, I said, was the problem. She flinched. Brian said it was just temporary, help to hold things until you recovered. You didn't think I'd live. My voice was low, steady. Let's not pretend this was sloppy paperwork. Mallory's eyes flicked away. He convinced me you'd be better off not dealing with money or stress. The doctor said, I never met that doctor. I leaned forward, dropping my voice. Because I was unconscious when you had me declared mentally incompetent. She pressed a napkin to her face, now visibly unraveling. I panicked. It started small. Bills, insurance stuff, then the house. I didn't know how to stop it once it started. I could smell her perfume, lavender and guilt. I raised you to ask for help. You learned instead to steal it, I said quietly. And when you got caught, you cried. She reached across the table, her fingers trembling. Please, just tell the judge we're resolving this privately. I don't want it to end this way. I stood slowly and deliberately. You don't get to choose how it ends. You already chose that when you signed my name and walked away. Mallory didn't follow me out. She just stared at her empty cup, shoulders hunched, like the ceiling had lowered just for her. Back in the quiet of my rental unit, I made myself a grilled cheese, sharp cheddar, sourdough, buttered both sides. I let the pan sizzle longer than usual, filling the space with something warm and real. Then I logged into Charles Schwab. The new trust glowed back at me like a heartbeat. Safe, untouched, mine. Then I opened the dashboard for Left Behind, Not Powerless. 50,000 subscribers. Messages poured in hourly. Thank yous, stories, pleas for legal help. We were building something that wasn't just about me anymore. Ruth texted a smiley face and the words, Tomorrow's the day, sleep early. I turned off my phone and tucked the charger into its drawer. The apartment had gone still, and for once I didn't dread the silence. It was clean, it belonged to me. A knock broke the peace, sharp, urgent. When I opened the door, no one was there, just a padded envelope on the floor. Certified from the Superior Court of California. I peeled the flap slowly, breath catching somewhere between fear and fury. The final verdict. The courtroom felt like a stage without curtains. No place to hide, no lines left to memorize. Just verdict and aftermath. The judge's gaze was heavy but not unkind as she shuffled papers. I could hear each crisp edge whisper as the final ruling was prepared. My fingers tightened around the bench, knuckles white, heart steady for once. Vivian Cole, she said, voice calm and cutting through the air like a gavel before it dropped. This court finds in your favor on all counts. A wave passed through the gallery, barely audible but electric. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I breathed a clean, uncluttered breath I hadn't taken since the day I woke up in that stripped hospital room. The judgment was expansive. Full restitution of assets, immediate cessation of Mallory's power of attorney, a public correction of competency status, and God help her, a legal order to publicly apologize. Her real estate license was revoked on grounds of ethical violations. Brian's name was flagged by both the Financial Crimes Division and IRS. His face, pale in the back row, didn't even lift from his phone. I rose, the weight on my shoulders lighter. Not gone. Justice had been served, but grief had never been so public. Tasha squeezed my arm as we walked out into the bright Sacramento sun. They'll be talking about this case in elder law seminars for a decade. I hope they talk about the silence before it too, I replied. That's where most of the damage happens. The media came fast. Calls, texts, emails, 60 Minutes, Dateline. Even a podcast based out of New York wanted an exclusive. I said no, over and over. I didn't want to become a spectacle. I wanted a garden. So I left California quietly without a forwarding address. Bought a little house outside Flathead Lake, Montana, a modest A-frame with birch siding and wide windows that breathed in the sky. It came with a sun porch and an acre of overgrown rose bushes. Just enough work to keep my hands busy and my mind still. When Ruth visited that first weekend, she brought a bottle of wine and a ridiculous straw hat she insisted I wear. We sat on the porch with our feet propped up on mismatched ottomans, watching the wind comb through the pine trees. To peace, she said, raising her glass. To finally owning my name again, I said, and we clinked. No one asked anything of me here. The mail was light, groceries were simple. My new bank account had no shared access, no digital fingerprints that weren't mine. Each morning I walked the edge of the lake with coffee in one hand and a notebook in the other, not to write about what had happened, but to remember how it felt to be still. My foundation, left behind, not powerless, was now run by a small staff of volunteers. I wasn't its face anymore. That was the plan. That was the point. We funded legal aid for elderly victims of fraud, especially those hurt by their own children. I got one final letter from the court. Mallory's public apology, stapled and bland, no signature, just a printed name. And then, late one night, after the dishes had dried and the air smelled like mountain cold, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize, but I knew the rhythm of her venom. Mallory, you'll die alone and I won't cry. I stared at the message, not with anger, not even sadness, but with the kind of clarity that only comes when you've already buried the emotional corpse of someone who's still technically alive. I set the phone down, poured another glass of wine. The night stretched out before me like a blank canvas. I used to believe silence meant something was missing, that the absence of voices, of footsteps, of purpose meant I'd failed to matter. But here, with the Montana air thick with pine and sun-bleached wind, silence had a shape, a dignity. It felt earned. Every morning I sat on my porch with a cup of strong coffee and the leather-bound journal I kept during recovery. The spine had begun to fray, edges curled from thumb-worn turns. My handwriting shifted from trembled letters in the early pages when I was still shaky from surgery to bold black loops as I reclaimed myself line by line. One entry stopped me. March 4th. She called me dead and I almost believed it, but I'm still here. That has to mean something. It did. It meant I was no longer Mallory's mother in any practical sense. I was no one's burden, no one's pawn, no one's illusion. I was Vivian Cole, survivor, builder, reclaimer. That afternoon I received a call from Tasha. "You sitting down?" she asked, teasing. "Your foundation just received a $100,000 anonymous donation." I blinked. From who? We traced it through 3 routing paths, but eventually it looped back to a bank account once owned by Mallory's first husband. You remember? The one who disappeared quietly? I remembered. He'd been too quiet, nervous around Brian, always looked like he was waiting for someone to swing first. "He left a note with the transfer," Tasha continued. "It just said, 'Thank you for surviving. I couldn't.' That money changed everything." We launched the Elder Justice Clinics that fall, pro bono legal workshops in public libraries and community centers across the western states. We hired 3 part-time attorneys and a crisis counselor. The first event in Missoula drew 400 attendees, retired teachers, widowed nurses, displaced veterans. Some came to listen, some came to cry, all came to be seen. During my welcome speech, I said, "They took everything but my mind, and now I'm giving that away for free." The room erupted in applause, not loud but long, a kind of applause that felt like permission. That night, I wrote a blog post by the same name. "They took everything but my mind." It was read 78,000 times in a week. Back in Montana, I cleaned off the porch and added 5 white rocking chairs I found at a salvage yard, painted them sage green, stenciled words beneath each seat. Hope, story, shelter, anger, begin. It wasn't a grand gesture, just a quiet one. My invitation to those still coming out of their own paper cages. One afternoon, the sky a watercolor of dusk oranges and bruised blues, I sat with a blanket over my knees, rereading old newspaper clippings about the case, not to punish myself, but to remind myself what it cost to forget my own worth. A gravel crunch echoed from the long driveway. I looked up, expecting Ruth or the mail truck. Instead, a girl, maybe 16, stood near the steps, skinny as a reed, hoodie sleeves tugged over her fists. Her eyes were wide, but not afraid. "Are you Miss Vivian?" she asked, voice carrying like wind between pine trees. "My mom told me you help people." I set down the journal and rose slowly. My knees weren't as quick these days, but my resolve never wavered. "I try," I said gently. "Why don't you come sit a while? Pick a chair." She hesitated, then stepped onto the porch and sat in the one marked "Begin." As I poured her tea, she whispered, "My brother took our grandma's house. Said she didn't need it anymore. I think he's lying." The sun reached gently across my porch, the light slower than it used to be, as if it knew I no longer ran toward anything. I sipped my coffee in silence, steam curling over my knuckles, and glanced at the framed invoice hanging beside the kitchen entryway. 28 years of care. Cream cardstock, black ink, stamped and signed. As if motherhood ever came with itemization. I hadn't expected the document to comfort me, but it did. These days the house no longer echoed, it hummed. Quiet footsteps moved through it. Not mine alone anymore, but women like me. Women who were once robbed of more than their savings, their dignity, their voice, their place at the table. Now they came to sit at mine. One of them, Amanda, was 32. Her brother had emptied her retirement under the guise of helping her manage it. Another, Lorraine, had spent 2 years paying rent on a house her daughter already sold out from under her. I didn't have to ask how they found me. Left Behind, Not Powerless had become more than a campaign. It was a lifeline. The house, once a lonely Montana retreat, was now a shared shelter. One guest room became 2, then we converted the attic. We called it the Restart House. No staff, no slogans, just soft light, clean sheets, and space to breathe. But the real shift came when Senator Delaney's office called. They'd read the platform's case studies, watched the clips, tracked the momentum. And so I sat in front of a congressional subcommittee, neat navy blazer, ironclad spine, and years of quiet rage translated into policy asks. Financial abuse by family, I told them, wasn't rare. It was epidemic, and it was federally invisible. I walked them through POA loopholes, trust fund fraud, and coercive incompetency declarations. I didn't speak with fury. I didn't need to. I brought receipts. They listened. I watched the stenographer's fingers fly like birds across her keys. Afterward, someone asked if I felt vindicated. I just smiled. I feel useful. Later that week, I stood in front of my easel for the first time in 10 years. Oil paint, turpentine, that specific chemical sweetness that smelled like college and dreams before sacrifice. My hand trembled for the first few strokes, then settled. I painted what I hadn't had. A mother and daughter sitting side by side, no tension in their hands, no silence in their mouths. That night, Ruth dropped by with a pie and said, "You look lighter." I told her, "I am. I stopped trying to be forgiven for surviving." She smiled. We toasted with lemonade instead of wine because sometimes clarity tastes better than comfort. The framed invoice stayed in the kitchen above the toaster. Every new woman who moved in saw it. Some cried, some laughed. One asked if she could make her own. "Yes," I told her, "but only if you add interest." It was a Friday when I opened the old leather-bound journal I used to write in, back when I was still asking why me. I flipped past the pane and settled on the last blank page. I wrote simply, slowly. They came for my mind, my body, my worth, and they lost all 3. I do not owe anyone the pieces I had to rebuild myself from. Then I signed it. No forwarding address, just freedom. And I closed the book. The house was quiet again, not lonely, just still. Outside, I heard soft laughter, Amanda and Lorraine playing cards on the porch swing, teasing each other over rules. The dog barked in the yard. Somewhere down the gravel road, a delivery truck pulled away. A new letter had arrived, but it wasn't a threat. It was an application from a woman in Colorado. "I heard there's a place where women like us start again," she'd written. She was right. Fade out.